Whipped and cast out for carrying a child out of wedlock, Clara nearly died in the dust, until a widowed rancher opened his door. But kindness breeds danger in a town that wants her gone. What he saw as mercy, others saw as betrayal. The first lash landed before she could scream. The second tore her shawl clean across the back. Clara Avery didn't cry, not yet. She gritted her teeth and stared at the cracked earth beneath her knees, refusing to give them the sound they wanted. Around her, the crowd murmured, their voices cruel or indifferent, faces blurred by sun and judgment. The preacher's voice boomed from the steps of the chapel, his righteous fury more venom than gospel. "Let this be a warning," he said, his hand raised as the switch came down again, "that sin breeds ruin, and no woman, married or not, shall bring shame to this town without consequence." The final blow nearly toppled her, but she forced herself upright, fists clenched in the dirt. She was 16 weeks along, barely showing but enough for tongues to wag and secrets to rot in open air. She had tried to run. She had begged Mrs. Donnelly for help, begged the midwife for silence. It hadn't mattered. In a town like Dryfield, a woman who got with child outside a man's promise had only two futures, shame or silence. Clara had chosen to live, and that made her a target. They left her outside the chapel when it was done, her blouse torn and skin weeping blood. She crawled behind the trough where the horses couldn't see her cry. Her breath came ragged and shallow, the ache in her body matched only by the hollowness in her chest. The baby hadn't moved since the whipping. Fear crept in fast, not for herself. She was already used up in their eyes, but for the life inside her. That was all she had left. Someone kicked dirt near her boots. She flinched and looked up, expecting another blow or a spit or worse, but the boots were scuffed, not polished, work-worn. The man didn't speak at first, just knelt beside her and pulled a canteen from his belt. "Can you drink?" His voice was quiet, rough from wind or smoke, maybe grief. She didn't answer, but when he tipped the water to her lips, she didn't resist. It was cold, clean. She drank until it hurt. The man waited, silent, as he wrapped a worn kerchief around the worst of her wounds. "They'll come back if you stay," he said eventually. "They'll finish what they started." She didn't ask who he was, didn't care. All she knew was that he hadn't hit her, hadn't spit, hadn't called her names. That was enough. He stood and offered his hand. "I've got a wagon. My place is west of town, past the low ridge. It ain't much, but it's safe." Clara stared at his hand. She thought of running again, but her legs trembled and the baby still hadn't stirred. She took it. They rode in silence. The town vanished behind them in dust and distance. Clara watched it shrink through the slats of the wagon, heart hammering as fear settled into her bones. She didn't know where he was taking her or what kind of man he really was, but she figured dying on the way was still better than staying. The ranch was modest, just a squat cabin, a lean-to barn, and fields stretched thin with drought. He helped her down without a word, kept his distance like he was afraid of scaring her. When she stumbled, he steadied her but didn't linger. "Name S. Eli Mercer," he said as he opened the door. "Wife died 2 winters back, just me now." He hesitated. "You can stay a while, rest, heal." Then he added, softer, "if you want." Clara nodded once, barely. Then the world tilted. She collapsed against the doorframe and everything went black. She woke on a cot near the hearth, her back wrapped in clean bandages and the smell of broth in the air. The pain was sharp but duller than before. The fire crackled softly. Outside she heard the creak of wood and the low bray of a mule. Eli was chopping something, firewood maybe. His rhythm was steady. She closed her eyes again, just for a minute. The next days passed like fog. Eli didn't press her for answers. He brought water, food, a basin to clean herself when she could stand. He never entered the room unless she called. When she finally spoke, her voice barely more than air, It wasn't to explain herself, but to ask a single question. Why'd you help me? He didn't answer right away, just stared into the fire. Didn't look like anyone else was going to. When the baby kicked again 4 days later, she wept, quietly into the pillow. Eli said nothing, just brought her fresh bread and a coat he said had belonged to his wife. "It's warm," was all he offered. They didn't talk much, but over time, the silence grew companionable. She learned he had once been a schoolteacher before the war took his hand and half his heart. He learned she liked to sing when no one was listening. She hummed once while brushing her hair, and he paused outside the door longer than usual. But Dryfield did not forget, not her and not Eli Mercer. The town whispered. Why would a widower take in a woman like that? What did he see in her? Was the baby even his? The lies grew, spread like fire in dry grass. Someone left a broken horseshoe nailed to Eli's gatepost, a warning. He pulled it down without a word. One morning she found Eli sitting on the porch, rifle across his knees. His eyes scanned the horizon like he was waiting for something. "They're talking about riding out here," he said without looking at her. "Couple of the boys from the mill figured they'd take care of the problem themselves." Clara's heart stopped. She gripped her belly. "You should send me away." Eli looked at her then. "You didn't do anything wrong." "They don't care." He nodded. "No, they don't." He leaned the rifle against the wall and stood. "But I do." It rained that night, hard and sudden, like a cleansing or a reckoning. Clara sat near the fire, her hand curled around her belly, while Eli paced by the windows. The sound of hooves reached them just past midnight. 3 riders, maybe 4. Eli loaded the rifle without a word. Clara stood too, though her knees shook. "I won't hide," she whispered. "Not again." He handed her a lantern. "Then don't, but stay inside, please." The door rattled once, then twice, then a voice slurred by whiskey and bitterness. "Bring her out, Eli. Ain't right what you're doing. She don't belong here." Eli didn't answer. The silence dragged, thick and waiting. Then another voice, younger, uncertain. "We don't have to do this, Dell. It's just a girl." The first man cursed. Something crashed against the porch glass, maybe. Eli didn't flinch. "I've got a child growing inside me," Clara said, her voice loud enough to carry through the walls. "And you want to kill me for it." More silence, then the sound of hooves pulling away. Eli did lower the rifle for a long time. The next morning, Clara found the porch scorched but standing. The rain had washed away the blood she hadn't realized she was holding in her chest. But peace never stayed long in places like this. It was quiet for 2 days after the riders came. Too quiet. Clara felt it in her chest, like a storm too far off to hear but close enough to taste. The world had taken a breath and was deciding what kind of fury to unleash next. Eli worked the land like nothing had changed, but his movements were sharper now, his eyes too often on the horizon. He cut fence line with his good hand, the other holding a coil of wire that Clara offered to tie when he couldn't. He didn't let her. Not because he doubted her strength, but because he saw the pain behind her spine, the way her hands trembled when she bent too long. That morning she found a feather on the windowsill, just a plain gray plume damp with dew, but it made her think of her mother. She didn't know why. Her mother had been no soft thing, raised 4 daughters with more bark than mercy. But there was something about the feather that made her heart ache, like some part of her had come unsown in the wind. She took it, tucked it between the pages of Eli's Bible when no one was looking. Clara began to walk more each day, down to the stream where she rinsed linens and sat in the shallows, letting the cold water numb her feet. She talked to the baby there, out loud sometimes, just soft little things, names she liked, food she missed, the way the creek sounded like lullabies when the wind moved through the rocks. Once she turned and caught Eli watching from the edge of the trees. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, then turned back toward the cabin. That night she dreamed of fire, not flames, just heat, suffocating and dark. She woke with her hand clutched over her stomach and her mouth already open in a silent scream. Eli didn't ask, but she saw the way his hand hovered near the lamp when they sat for breakfast, as if ready should she need light. By the third week they'd fallen into a rhythm. Eli worked, Clara tended, sometimes they ate in silence. Sometimes she told him things she hadn't told anyone about the father, how she never wanted him, not really, but had been tired and hungry and lonely. It wasn't love, she admitted, more to herself than to him. It was survival. Eli nodded, didn't judge. She liked that about him, that he listened more than he spoke, that when he did speak it mattered. The baby grew restless in her belly, sharp little kicks and rolls that made her laugh despite herself. Eli looked up every time she laughed like it startled him, like it wasn't a sound he expected from someone like her. One night, when thunder rolled low over the ridge, she leaned against the doorframe and whispered, "I want to name her June." Eli didn't turn from where he was oiling his rifle. "Pretty name." "It was my sister S. She died when we were kids, fever." Clara traced the edge of the wood with her thumb. "I always thought if I had something to love, really love, I'd name it after her." Eli finished with the rifle and set it aside. "Then June it is." The next morning the first letter arrived, pinned to the gatepost with the same horseshoe nail from before. Clara found it when she went to hang the wash, an envelope damp with dew, scrawled with a single line, "You'll bring hell on him if you stay." No name, no signature, just menace in ink. She showed it to Eli. He burned it in the stove without reading it twice. 2 days later they found the chicken coop ransacked. Every hen gone save one, strangled and nailed to the post with another note. "Next time it's the mule." Eli swore softly, a sound Clara hadn't heard from him before. He took down the note and fed it to the flames like the first. But that night he sat outside with the rifle again. He didn't speak, didn't sleep. And when Clara brought him coffee in the pale blue hours before dawn, he took it with shaking fingers. "This ain't about you anymore," he said, voice hoarse. "It's about who they think I am. What kind of man takes in a woman they've already condemned?" Clara sat beside him. "You took me in because they left me for dead." "That ain't the part they see," he muttered. "They see a man defending a woman they want buried." She touched his hand, "Then let them see it." He looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them, something raw, something wordless. But the peace cracked the next morning. It started with a rider, just one, young, maybe 19, came up the trail slow, hands up, no gun drawn. Clara stood on the porch, Eli beside her. The boy looked like he hadn't slept in days. His face was pale, boots crusted with red clay. "Name S. Micah Lorne," he said, "from Dryfield." Eli didn't move. "You one of Crowley's boys." The name turned Clara's blood cold. Crowley. She hadn't heard it in months. The father. The man who'd touched her arm behind the chapel and whispered promises like poison. She hadn't seen him since she fled. She prayed he didn't care enough to chase her down. Micah shook his head. "Crowley don't know I'm here. I came 'cause he's talkin'. Said he'll come for her, said the baby's his." Clara felt the air leave her lungs. Eli stepped forward. "You expect me to believe you rode out here to warn us out of kindness?" Micah licked his lips. "No, I rode out 'cause my sister Maddie, she knew Clara, said she was good. Said if we didn't stop Crowley, he'd burn everything down. Maddie, she died last spring, but she believed in doing right." Eli glanced at Clara. Her face had gone white. When? 3 days, maybe 4. That's when Crowley said he'd come. Eli nodded once. Get inside. What? Both of you now. Micah blinked, then followed Clara through the door. Eli didn't sleep that night either. Neither did Clara. They sat by the fire, Micah curled on the floor beside the hearth, twitching like a dog in a bad dream. Clara stared into the flames. What if he doesn't stop this time? Eli's jaw tightened. Then he don't leave here walking. Clara looked at the rifle, then at Eli. You ready to kill for me? He met her eyes. I already did in a way, the moment I let you in. A gust of wind rattled the windows, and Clara flinched. The next morning they fortified the house, boarded the windows, secured the barn. Micah helped without asking, hammering boards with more fear than strength. Eli showed Clara how to shoot, not to kill, just to warn. If it comes to it, he said, placing the revolver in her hands, aim for the ground first, then the leg, never the chest unless you mean it. She held the gun like it was heavier than her whole body, but she nodded. That night the wind blew hard, the trees groaned, and Clara thought of the chapel steps, of blood on her back, of voices rising in judgment. She touched her belly and whispered, "We're not running anymore." But in her heart she knew Crowley was coming. And he wouldn't come alone. By sunrise the wind had settled into an eerie hush, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it warns. Clara stood barefoot on the porch, her hand pressed gently to her belly, eyes locked on the ridge where the trail vanished into the trees. Nothing yet, no dust, no hooves, but she could feel it deep in her gut, a wrongness curling like smoke. June stirred inside her, soft and rhythmic, unaware of the danger drawing close. Clara whispered to her, not words but presence, the soft hum of a mother trying to be calm for someone smaller than fear. Eli came up behind her without a sound. He smelled of wood smoke and the sharp tang of gun oil. "Coffee," he offered, holding out a mug. Clara took it with a nod. "How many do you think he'll bring?" Eli sipped his own and didn't answer right away. Crowley's not the type to come alone, not when there's fire in him. He'll bring men, maybe 2, maybe 10. She turned to him. "Can we hold out?" Eli looked at her, and she could tell by the crease in his brow that he was weighing every inch of his land. Not forever, but long enough to make him bleed. Micah came out from the barn, straw clinging to his shirt, a rifle awkwardly slung over his shoulder. He still walked like he didn't belong in his boots. "North fence has drag marks. Someone was out there last night, I think." Eli didn't flinch, checking the place, seeing if we were watching. Clara felt the hair on her arms rise. "So they know we're ready." "They know we're scared," Micah said, trying to sound brave and failing. "Fear's not weakness," Eli murmured almost to himself. "It's what you do with it that counts." They spent the morning in quiet preparation. Eli moved through the house like a soldier, checking every board, every latch. He placed a second rifle near the back door, another beneath the porch slats where Clara could reach it. "Don't aim unless you have to," he said again. "But don't hesitate either." Clara cleaned the kitchen as if it mattered, as if a clean floor could somehow make the day less bloody. She folded linens that didn't need folding. She wiped down the same windows twice, anything to keep her hands moving. Micah sat on the front step, eyes scanning the tree line, finger twitching on the stock of the rifle he didn't know how to use. "My pa always said a man's true worth shows up when it's too late to fake it," he muttered. Eli passed him without a word. By noon the first rider appeared, alone, dressed in black like it was a play and he was the villain too proud to hide it. He didn't stop at the gate, just rode slow and arrogant right up to the porch. Eli stepped forward. Clara stood in the doorway behind him, the revolver tucked into her apron pocket, her other hand resting on her belly. The rider smiled, a flash of gold tooth and cruelty. "Afternoon," he drawled. "Name S. Fitch. I reckon you already know why I'm here." Eli didn't move. If Crowley wants to speak, he can ride his own horse. Fitch grinned wider. "He's not far. Thought I'd be polite and give you a moment to reconsider." His eyes slid to Clara. "Bring her out proper and we won't burn the place down." "You bring fire to my land," Eli said, his voice low and even. "You'd best be ready to die on it." Fitch's smile slipped for half a second. Then he spat in the dust, turned his horse with a jerk and rode off. Clara exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. "He'll be back," Eli said, "next time with a show." They didn't eat much that day. No one could stomach it. Micah tried to sharpen his knife and cut his thumb instead. Clara bandaged it without speaking. The blood stained her fingers. Evening came like a shudder, the light vanishing too quickly. They sat around the fire, rifles near, all three facing outward like animals cornered in a den. The air felt heavy, like something holding its breath. Then came the sound. Hooves many, distant but deliberate. Clara stood. "How many?" Eli listened. "6, maybe more." Micah paled. "We can't." "You want to run?" Eli asked. The boy didn't answer. The men arrived just after dark, torches flickering like vipers in the night. They didn't ride straight up this time. They spread out, circling, staying just beyond the fence line. Clara watched through the window, her heart thudding so loud she thought they must hear it. June kicked again. Strong. Then Crowley spoke. His voice cut through the air like a whip. "Eli Mercer, I'm here for what's mine." Clara flinched. Her knees nearly buckled, but she stayed upright. Eli opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. "She's not yours, and neither is the child." "You don't get to decide that," Crowley called back. "She was mine before she even knew what she was carrying." "She was never yours," Clara shouted, stepping into the light beside Eli. "You used me and cast me aside. You left me to die." A hush, then laughter. Crowley's men chuckled, ugly and amused. "You hear that, boys?" Crowley sneered. "She thinks she's got a voice." Eli lifted the rifle. "She has mine." One of the men raised his gun. A shot cracked into the night, splintered the porch rail 2 feet from Eli's boots. Eli fired back. The man dropped, screaming. Chaos. Torches flew, shots rang out, the night exploded. Clara ducked, grabbing Micah by the collar and pulling him back from the window. "Stay down." Eli fired again and again, moving along the porch with the calm of a man who'd fought before. 2 more riders charged the fence. Micah scrambled up and managed a single shot, missed, but it scattered the horses. A torch hit the barn, fire leapt. Clara ran for the water barrels, filled a bucket, and doused the flames crawling up the dry wood. Smoke stung her eyes. She coughed, heaved another bucket. The baby kicked again, too much, too fast. Then someone reached for her. A hand, rough and stinking of whiskey, grabbed her arm near the barn. She screamed, twisted, but couldn't break free. Then bang! The man fell backward. Micah stood 10 feet away, rifle shaking in his hands. "Get inside," he cried. Clara ran. Inside, Eli slammed the door shut. 2 bullets punched into the wall, missing him by inches. He turned to Clara. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "No, but it's coming fast. The baby, I think it's coming." He stared at her, stunned. "We can't go anywhere," she whispered. "Not now." The fire spread. The barn was gone. Horses screamed. Crowley stood outside the gate, untouched, unbothered. He didn't fight. He watched. Eli knew what that meant. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And the worst part hadn't even come yet. The screams had quieted, but the fire didn't. It snapped and hissed as it consumed the barn in hungry waves, casting orange shadows across the snow-dusted yard. Clara knelt inside the cabin, her back to the wall, one hand gripping a stool leg, the other clutching her belly. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold. The contractions had started 2 hours earlier, sharp, sudden, and angry, but now they came like waves with no room between. There was no time, no doctor, no midwife. Just blood, fear, and the steady pressure of something ancient forcing its way into the world. "I need towels," she whispered, jaw clenched. "And water. Eli, go, please go." He was already moving, grabbing the basin from the corner and tossing in rags from a chest by the fire. His boots thudded hard on the floorboards as he poured in what was left of the boiled water from the kettle, then pushed it across the floor to her. "Tell me what to do," he said, breath ragged. Micah stood frozen by the window, still gripping the rifle though the gunfire had stopped. The boy's face was pale, streaked with soot. "What if they come back?" he muttered. "What if they're just waiting?" "Then they'll wait," Eli snapped. "She's having the baby now." Outside, the air had gone still. No more shots, no more voices, just fire crackling and the faint rustle of wind through the pines. Clara grit her teeth and arched forward, the pain nearly tearing her in half. She screamed once, and it echoed through the cabin like a shot. "Micah," Eli barked, "get more water now. Use snow if you have to." The boy dropped the rifle and ran. Clara leaned back, chest heaving. "It's too soon," she gasped. "It's too." "No," Eli said firmly, kneeling beside her. "It's now. That's all that matters." She looked at him, eyes wild with pain and fear. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can. You already have." His voice softened but stayed strong. "You walked out of Dryfield in pieces and made it here. You lived when they tried to bury you. You're not breaking now." Another contraction. Her whole body clenched. She screamed again, lower this time, guttural and full of fury. Micah burst back in, snow melting off a half-filled pail. Eli grabbed it, soaked another rag and pressed it to her forehead. "Get blankets," he told the boy. "Anything clean." Micah scrambled toward the cot, pulling the quilts loose and dropping them at Eli's feet. Then he backed away, eyes wide. "She's bleeding," he whispered. Clara's breath came in short, shallow gasps. Her face was damp, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "She's close," Eli said, "but we've got to be fast." Another scream, then a silence so deep it swallowed the wind. Clara gasped, "Something's wrong, I don't feel." The door slammed open. Micah spun, grabbing the rifle again, but it wasn't another of Crowley's men. It was a woman. Older, gray hair, leather gloves. Her face was lined and hard, but her eyes were sharp. "Step aside," she snapped. "You're doing this all wrong." Eli blinked. "Who?" "No time. Get me thread, clean blade, hot water. I'm Dinah Travers. I was a midwife long before you learned to shoot." Clara cried out again. Dinah dropped to her knees beside her, eyes scanning, hands already pulling back the quilts. "She's breached," Dinah muttered. "We'll have to turn her." Eli went pale. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dinah said, snapping her gloves on, "she might die, or the child might, or both. Now do as I say." The room became chaos. Eli moved like a man possessed, fetching what she needed. Dinah worked with brutal focus. Clara bit down on a strip of leather to keep from shattering her own teeth. Sweat poured off her skin. Blood soaked the rags. The cabin spun around her. Micah stood guard at the window again, rifle raised, but the world outside had vanished behind a wall of smoke. Eli hovered, watching Dinah's hands disappear beneath the blankets. "She's tearing," Dinah muttered. "We don't move now, we lose them both." "Then do it," Clara rasped, spitting the leather from her mouth. "I don't care what it costs, just save her." Dinah didn't hesitate. She reached, twisted, pressed. Clara screamed louder than the gunshots had ever rung. Her spine arched. Her body broke and reformed in the span of one terrible second. Then crying. Not Clara, not Eli. A baby, a girl. Tiny, red, screaming like a storm given breath. Clara collapsed. Dinah moved fast, wrapping the child in one of the clean quilts and cutting the cord. "She's small," she said, "but breathing." Clara's eyes fluttered. "June," she whispered. "She's here," Dinah said, "but you're not done yet, stay with me." The afterbirth came fast. Clara whimpered but didn't scream again. She was too tired. Eli sat beside her, cradling the child awkwardly in his arms. He looked like he was holding something made of light. "She has her nose," he whispered. Dinah raised an eyebrow. "You saying it's yours?" "No," Eli said, "but I'll fight anyone who tries to say otherwise." Micah exhaled a shaky breath and lowered the rifle. "Someone brought you here," Dinah said, eyes fixed on Clara. "Don't know who, but you've got a mark on you now. This ain't over." Clara tried to speak, couldn't, just nodded. Eli stood. "You came out here in the middle of all this. Why?" Dinah smirked. "Because when the town turns ugly, someone's got to remind it what mercy looks like." She glanced out the window. "But they'll be back. Next time they won't wait for permission to burn the house." "We're ready," Eli said. "No, you're not," she turned to Micah. "You know the land better than me. You ride north, there's a marshal in Bethel Springs, his name's Randall. Tell him Clara Avery's still alive. Tell him Crowley tried to kill her. He'll come." Micah looked at Eli. "I can't." "You have to," Eli said. "You saw what they did. You saw the fire. They'll come again. We need law." The boy hesitated, then ran for the mule. Eli stood on the porch, rifle in hand, as Micah disappeared into the trees. Inside, Clara slept. June nestled against her chest. Dinah cleaned up in silence, her hands quick but respectful. Eli stayed outside until dawn. Watching. Waiting. The wind shifted at sunrise. And with it came voices. Not many. Just one at first. But enough. Crowley was coming back. And this time, he wasn't bringing fire. He was bringing a noose. The morning air hung still, too still, like the land itself was waiting to see who would draw the next breath. The sky was washed pale and wide, clouds crawling low and lazy overhead, but Clara couldn't see it. She was still too weak to rise, her body broken open by birth and held together now only by a sliver of breath and will. June slept against her chest, barely bigger than her mother's hand, soft as dawn, wrapped tight in the last clean quilt. The fire had burned down to ash. Dinah stirred the coals with a poker and added another log. "She'll need food soon," she said softly. "Not just milk, broth, something warm." Eli stood at the window, unmoving. He hadn't spoken much since Micah left. His eyes scanned the tree line, jaw locked, rifle slung across his shoulder like a question that had no good answer. He built a barrier just inside the gate that morning, a crude X-shaped frame of wood and wire, rigged with a rope that could pull it closed from the porch. He tested it 3 times, each time more silent than the last. "Sleep," Dinah said behind him. "If you don't, you'll fall the second they come, and they will come." "I know," Eli said. "You still think you're enough to stop them?" Eli looked at her, voice low. "I don't have the luxury of thinking anything else." Outside, the wind stirred the trees but didn't reach the ground. No birds sang. No coyotes howled. Just the slow drip of melted frost sliding off the roof like time ticking away. Clara opened her eyes mid-morning. Her face was pale, eyes ringed with shadows, but her voice had steadied. "How long do I have?" Dinah brought her a cup of broth. "You shouldn't be thinking about that yet." "But I am." Eli turned toward her. "Micah will bring the marshal. He'll come." Clara stared at the wall. "You don't know that." "I know the kind of man who answers that kind of call, and I know Micah's scared enough to ride fast." Dinah didn't argue, just pressed a hand to Clara's forehead, checked her pulse. "You've got a fever, but it's not rising. You rest. That's your only job now." Clara looked down at June, eyes damp but steady. "I just want her to be safe." "She will be," Eli said. "You don't know that either." "No," he said, "but I'll die trying to make it true." That afternoon the smoke rose again, but not from their chimney. Eli saw it first, rising behind the ridge like a signal, controlled, not wild, meant to be seen. He adjusted the scope on his rifle, scanning the tree line, and spotted them moving, slow, methodical, 5 riders, maybe 6, and another man on foot trailing behind. The man in the middle walked with a limp, tall, broad shoulders, a coat too clean for someone out here. Crowley. He was coming on foot now. That meant he wanted something worse than death. He wanted a performance. Eli turned and shouted into the cabin, "They're close." Dinah reached for the revolver beside the hearth. Clara stirred but didn't sit up. She just tightened her grip on June, holding her like something someone could still take. "What do you want me to do?" Dinah asked, voice clipped. "Stay inside. Keep them low. If it comes to it, run out the back. Don't wait for me." "I won't leave her." "I'm not asking." "Yes, you are." Eli didn't argue, just nodded once and stepped out onto the porch. The riders didn't charge this time. They approached in silence, 5 mounted men, one leading the mule Eli had given Micah. It moved slow and awkward, its sides streaked with blood. Clara saw it through the window. Her stomach dropped. "Micah." Dinah grabbed her hand. "We don't know, that could be anything." But it was. Eli stepped forward as Crowley stopped 10 paces from the porch. The man still wore that smug smile, still held himself like a sermon gone rotten. His hair was slicked back, his boots too polished. His voice came soft but sharp. "Morning, Mercer. Nice day to end a lie." "You brought blood to my land," Eli said. Crowley raised his brows. "You harbor a woman who belongs in a cell or a grave. Which part am I not supposed to take personally?" "She was never yours." "I branded her." "She was never yours," Eli repeated, slower this time. Crowley's smile widened. "You think you've done something noble here, saved a soul that doesn't want saving. She left with my seed in her belly and spit on God's law. That's not a mother. That's a curse." Eli raised the rifle. "You speak another word about her, and I'll put you in the ground." "You'll try," Crowley said, "but we both know you're outnumbered. That boy of yours," he jerked a thumb at the mule, "didn't get far." The mule turned, and that's when Eli saw the saddlebag, ripped, dark with blood. No Micah. Crowley pulled a piece of paper from his coat and tossed it onto the dirt. He had this on him. Your little letter to Justice. Problem is, Justice don't ride these roads anymore. Eli didn't flinch. Behind him, Clara sobbed quietly, not for herself, for Micah, for a boy who tried to do right and got buried for it. Crowley dismounted slowly. I want her. I want the child. You give them to me and I leave this place as is. You keep M, I burn it down. I burn you down. Eli didn't move. You'll die before you take a single breath from her. Crowley tilted his head. Then let's see. He whistled. The riders raised their rifles. The first shot came fast. Eli ducked, rolled behind the porch beam, and fired back. One of the riders fell. Dinah pulled Clara and the baby into the root cellar hatch under the floorboards. Dust rained from the ceiling as bullets tore through the cabin. Eli moved fast, firing, reloading, never standing still. He took out a second rider, then a third. But the bullets came closer now, chipping the doorframe, whistling past his ears. Crowley stood at the edge of the chaos, untouched, watching again. Eli climbed the roof, crouching low, rifle steady. He shot the fourth rider from above clean through the chest. The fifth tried to run, didn't get far. Silence returned, but not peace. Crowley was gone. Disappeared into the trees the second his men started falling. Left the dead like they meant nothing. Eli didn't follow, not yet. He climbed down, chest heaving, blood on his sleeve, though it wasn't his. He stepped into the cabin. Dinah emerged from the cellar, eyes wild. You all right? I am for now. Clara lay curled around the baby, eyes shut but breathing. He's not done, Eli said. No, Dinah agreed. He's just circling now like a wolf, waiting for the bleeding to start. They buried the riders out back. No prayers. No words. Just dirt. That night Eli stood over the graves and whispered, You picked the wrong man to scare. Clara held June and stared at the ceiling. He's not gone. No, Eli said from the chair nearby. He's just hiding. And in the darkness outside, something moved. Something watching. Something that wasn't going to wait long. The night didn't sleep. Not really. It only crouched low, waiting. The wind had gone still again, the kind of stillness that made your skin prickle like it knew something was coming and didn't want to be awake for it. Inside the cabin, Eli sat by the hearth with the fire low, rifle across his knees, watching the shadows move across the floor. Dinah had finally dozed off in the rocker, her chin on her chest, arms folded like a barricade across her ribs. Clara lay on the cot, June sleeping against her shoulder, the child's tiny breath stirring the blanket with each rise and fall. She looked peaceful, but Eli knew better. Clara hadn't really slept since Crowley returned. Every time her eyes closed, her hand moved over June's back, as if checking again and again that she was still there, still breathing. When dawn broke, it didn't rise in gold. It bled through the clouds in gray streaks, dull and cold. The world looked washed out, and the silence made Eli feel like he was looking at the last day before something broke for good. He stepped onto the porch, jaw set, eyes sweeping the land. The graves were still there, 5 crosses now tilting in the half-frozen dirt. No sign of Crowley. No sign of Micah's body either. Eli had searched for hours after the last fight, circling the woods, looking for any sign of where the boy had fallen. Nothing. Just the mule and that blood-smeared saddlebag. Back inside, Clara stirred. Her voice was hoarse, flat. How long? 3 days since Micah rode out, Eli answered without turning. 2 since Crowley attacked. And no law, no help. Eli didn't speak. He didn't need to. The answer was written all over his face. Dinah woke with a start and rubbed her eyes. We can't sit here waiting for him to pick the time. We've got to draw him out. Eli looked at her. You think he'll bite? He's vain, she said, stretching her aching limbs. He wants her back, wants to see it himself. He won't let someone else finish it. Clara sat up slowly, wincing. Then give him a reason. Eli turned. What are you saying? I'm saying, she said, voice gaining strength, we end it, here on our terms, use me as bait. No, Eli said at once. But Clara didn't look away. I didn't crawl out of Dryfield and survive being whipped just to hide underground. I didn't carry June through frost and fire to die in a cellar. You just gave birth. I'm not asking for a rifle, Eli. I'm asking for a chance. I'll be on the porch, alone. He won't be able to resist it. You stay out of sight. You wait. Dinah stared at her for a long time, then slowly nodded. He'll come. Eli paced, fists clenched, but he didn't argue again. The silence said enough. He knew she was right. They spent the day readying the trap. Eli reinforced the porch beams and rigged the wire at the gate with a second trip snare. Dinah laid a hammer and nails behind the firewood stack, along with the revolver. They tested every creak in the floorboards, every window latch, every shadow. By sundown, Clara sat on the porch in the rocking chair, wrapped in a dark shawl with June pressed to her chest. Her eyes never left the tree line. She looked like a widow waiting for a ghost. Eli stayed hidden near the barn, crouched behind the trough, rifle resting on a hay bale. Dinah stood watch from the loft window, a pistol in each boot. The first sign came just after nightfall, a glint of something catching moonlight between the trees. Then a whisper, not a voice. Leather, movement, footsteps over frost-hardened ground. Slow, deliberate. Clara shifted slightly in the chair, just enough to adjust June's blanket. Her hands trembled, but not from cold. He stepped out of the trees alone. Crowley. No riders, no men, just him. He wore black as always, a hat pulled low over his brow, a rifle slung across his back, a pistol loose at his hip, and that smile, thin and sharp as a blade. Well, look at you, he said softly, stepping closer, playing house on a dead man's land. Clara didn't flinch. You're outnumbered. I always was, he said, stopping 5 feet from the porch. That's never been the issue. Then what is? Crowley looked at her. You. I'm not yours, she said. You were, he said, voice slipping into something dark and slick. For one night, that's all it takes to make a claim. Clara rocked June slowly. You left me to die. He tilted his head. And you didn't. That's the trouble with leaving people half dead. They crawl back. He stepped forward, one boot on the first stair. You know what Dryfield says now, that you bewitched me, that you got with child and turned savage. I could have saved you. I still can. Come back. Say the child was mine. Say you were desperate. They'll forgive you. She looked down at June, then back at him. No, she said. Crowley smiled again. Then I'll burn this land and salt the ashes. His hand went for the pistol. Eli fired. Crowley staggered back, hit in the shoulder. Dinah shouted from the loft, down. Clara dove sideways, shielding the baby. Crowley fired wildly, hitting the porch post. Eli moved fast, shooting again, missed. Dinah's shot caught Crowley in the thigh. He collapsed, screaming, blood spilling into the dirt. Eli ran forward, rifle raised. But it wasn't over. From the woods, 3 more men emerged, silent, moving fast. Crowley's insurance. One fired, hitting the porch steps. Another aimed for the barn. Dinah dropped one from the loft. Eli dropped another as he sprinted for the porch. The last man reached Clara, grabbed her arm, tried to rip the baby away. Clara screamed. Eli didn't aim. He tackled the man into the dirt, fists flying. They rolled, biting, clawing. The man reached for a knife. Eli headbutted him. Bone cracked. The man collapsed. Silence. The only sound was June crying. Crowley lay moaning in the dirt, his leg twisted, blood soaking the ground. Eli stood over him, chest heaving. "You want to finish it," Crowley rasped. "Be a killer like me." Eli didn't speak. Dinah limped down from the loft, face bruised, gun smoking. Clara stepped forward barefoot, bleeding from a cut on her leg. "You're not worth a bullet," she said to Crowley. She looked at Eli. "We tie him, drag him to town, let them see what he is." Eli finally nodded. They bound him tight, every limb shaking. By dawn, they hitched the wagon. Clara rode in back with June and Dinah. Eli drove. Crowley groaned in the dirt bed behind them. As the cabin faded behind them, Clara whispered to June, "This is how we bury ghosts." And the sun finally rose. The road into Dryfield hadn't changed, but the people lining it had. When Eli guided the wagon into town that afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the dusty street, it wasn't the usual silence that met them. It was eyes, dozens of them, watching from windows, leaning against door frames, whispering behind gloved hands, as if the whole town had sensed something was coming and had shown up to bear witness. Word had spread faster than fire. Clara Avery was alive, and she'd come back dragging her ghost in chains. Crowley lay bound in the back of the wagon, half conscious, his leg a ruined mess of blood and bone. Dinah had wrapped it, more from obligation than mercy. He hadn't spoken since they left the homestead, not after Eli punched him in the ribs to keep him quiet when he started slurring about curses and children born wrong. Clara sat upright in the back, June sleeping in her arms, swaddled tight in the last clean cloth Dinah had brought. Her face was pale but set like stone. She didn't look left or right as they passed the saloon, the smithy, the churchyard. Not when familiar faces stared. Not when children paused mid-play to gawk. She kept her eyes forward. Eli pulled the reins hard in front of the sheriff's office, and the horses stilled. The silence that followed felt carved from glass. Sheriff Rowan stepped out of the shade. He was an older man now, older than when Clara had last seen him, though not by much. His coat hung heavier around his frame and his badge looked dull. His eyes moved from Clara to Crowley and didn't blink. "Well," he said, voice dry, "that's a hell of a sight." Eli climbed down. "You going to take him in or not?" Rowan chewed the inside of his cheek. "Wasn't sure I'd see her again. Last time they said U.D. died." "Seems the town's good at saying things," Clara said, her voice steady. "Maybe it's time it started listening instead." Rowan stepped forward slowly. "You got proof of what he did?" "Ask the boy he shot," Eli said. Rowan frowned. "Micah, the stables said he didn't make it." Eli's jaw tightened. "We never found the body." "I saw the blood," Dinah added. "And the saddlebag, that boy was heading to you. You ignored the call." Rowan didn't flinch. "I never saw the letter." Clara slid off the wagon slowly, clutching June close. "You didn't need a letter to know he was dangerous. You just needed a spine." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few heads turned. One woman stepped back into her house, ashamed. Rowan nodded once slow. "You're right." Then he turned toward the wagon. "Bring him in. He'll get a hearing." "No," Clara said, and her voice cut through the murmur like a blade. Rowan paused. "What?" "Not a hearing. A trial, public, before the whole town. You let them shame me in front of everyone, made me bleed for what he did. I want their eyes on him now. I want them to see it." Rowan looked at Eli, then Dinah, then Clara again. He saw it wasn't a request. It was the price. He nodded once. 2 days in the church hall, that do. Clara turned her back on him. "He's not going anywhere." They moved Crowley inside, locked him in the holding cell beneath the stairs. Eli stayed close, never more than a few feet away, his rifle leaning against the doorframe like punctuation. Dinah took Clara and June to the boarding house, Mabel's place. The same Mabel who used to wash linens for the preacher and had once turned her face away when Clara passed, bleeding and half-dressed, down the street. Mabel didn't look away this time. She opened the door wide and said nothing, just reached for the child. By evening the church bell rang 3 times. It had always meant news, birth, death, or trouble. This time it meant all 3. The town stirred, lanterns lit, windows flickered, and still no one said a word out loud. That night Clara couldn't sleep. June whimpered softly in her makeshift crib near the wall, but Clara didn't move to pick her up. Her legs ached too much, her arms felt hollow, and her heart wouldn't stop pounding. Dinah sat beside her, cleaning one of her pistols by lamplight. "You sure you want this?" Standing up there, telling them everything. Clara looked down at her hands. The whip scars had faded some, not gone but no longer angry. "It's not for them, it's for her. She deserves a name without shame." Dinah nodded. "They'll squirm." "They should." In the jailhouse, Crowley muttered in his sleep. Eli stood in the doorway, watching the street. Every time a shutter clattered or a horse snorted, he gripped the rifle tighter. He didn't trust peace, not anymore. The next day passed slowly. Word spread, but no one said it out loud. Still, by the time evening came, the church was full, packed wall to wall with townsfolk, every bench groaning under weight, men with hats in hand, women with their Sunday gloves. The preacher looked nervous, as if he hadn't signed up for this kind of sermon. Sheriff Rowan stood at the front, hands behind his back. Crowley sat to the side, bandaged and shackled, but upright. His face was bruised, but the smile hadn't left him. Clara entered with Dinah and Eli behind her. June stayed with Mabel. The murmurs began at once. Faces turned, some shocked, some ashamed. Clara walked straight down the aisle, the click of her boots loud against the boards, and took her place beside Rowan. He cleared his throat. "We're not calling this a trial in law, but you all deserve to hear what's happened." She's asked to speak. Clara didn't wait. She stepped forward, facing the crowd, hands steady. "I was branded," she began, "dragged through town, whipped until I couldn't stand, all because I was pregnant and unmarried." She let the silence sit. "I told you then it wasn't by choice. That he," she pointed at Crowley, "forced himself on me." Crowley laughed just once, low and mean. Clara didn't look at him. "You said I was lying, that I seduced him, that I wanted it." Some faces turned away. One man stood and left. "I walked out of this town bleeding, barefoot, and carrying a child I never asked for, and I survived. I gave birth alone. I built a life on land he tried to burn. I buried a boy he killed, and I came back." Another silence. Then from the back of the room, a voice. "I remember the day she was dragged down the street." It was Mabel. She stood up slowly. I was on my porch. I didn't say a word. I didn't stop it. A pause. I'm sorry, she said, then sat down again. Another voice. My husband held the whip. He's dead now, but I carry the shame for him. What was done to you wasn't justice. And another, we all saw it, we all knew, but we were scared of him, of his money, his name. Clara looked out at them all. I don't want revenge. I want truth. I want my daughter to grow up knowing the world didn't break me. Rowan stepped forward. Crowley, you got anything to say? Crowley looked up. His smile was gone now. His eyes were dull. I did it, he said. Every bit of it. She said no, I didn't care. Gasps, hands over mouths. The preacher sat down. I branded her so I wouldn't be blamed. I wanted them to hate her more than they feared me. Rowan turned to the crowd. I think that settles it. The crowd moved slow at first. A few stood, then more, then someone whispered out of town, and then louder out. Crowley was dragged out of the church and shoved into the street. Rowan didn't stop them. Eli didn't move. They left him by the gate. By sundown he was gone. Clara walked home in silence. June pressed close. Eli walked beside her. When they reached Mabel's porch, Clara stopped. You think it's over? She asked. Eli looked up at the stars. No, he said, but it's quieter now. Clara looked down at June. She deserves better than quiet. She'll have it, Eli said, because you stayed. The wind shifted again 3 days after Crowley was driven from Dryfield, bringing with it the early scent of spring, mud, thawing roots, the brittle remains of winter cracking beneath the sun. But no season could erase what had come before. Some things lingered longer than snow. Still, on the land where it all began, something was growing. Not flowers yet, not grass, but something stronger. Something that took root in silence and refused to die in it. Clara stood barefoot on Eli's porch, the same boards she'd once bled on, arms folded beneath her shawl, watching the path curve down toward the edge of the valley. June was asleep inside, her tiny breaths rhythmic, her fingers curled around a threadbare corner of quilt. Mabel had brought her an embroidered bonnet the day before, one she'd sewn herself, and when Clara laid it across June's head, something broke and healed all at once. Sun's warming up, Eli said behind her, stepping out onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. Another week or so, and the creek'll run full again. Clara took one of the mugs, hands wrapped tight around it. I don't remember the last time I smelled earth. You've been smelling fire and blood too long, Eli said. She nodded, eyes distant. You think he's still out there? Crowley, Eli's jaw tightened. He's too proud to go quietly. He'll show his face again, somewhere but not here. How can you be sure? Because this place ain't scared of him anymore. Down in town, the changes were small but noticeable. The church doors were open every Sunday, but the sermons had changed. The preacher no longer preached about sin as something that grew only in women. The smith had hired a girl as an apprentice. Mabel had opened a schoolhouse beside her inn, just 1 room and a few benches, and Clara's name was no longer said in whispers. It was said aloud now, with apology, with weight. But change didn't come all at once. It came slow, like trust, like forgiveness. That week Dinah packed her satchel. You leaving? Clara asked. Just for a while, she said, strapping the bag closed. Got a sister up in Smoke Ridge. Haven't seen her in years. Thought it was about time. You'll come back. Dinah smiled. If you let me. Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the woman who'd pulled her from death and stayed through the worst of it. You always have a place here. Dinah paused, then reached into her coat and handed over a small silver locket. Was my mother's. She gave it to me after my first child was born. Thought you ought to have it now. Clara's breath caught. Dinah. No fuss, she said. Just take it, keep it close. They hugged once more, and then Dinah mounted the borrowed horse, waved once and rode out. Clara stood beside Eli, watching her fade into the distance. You ever think about leaving? Eli's eyes didn't move from the horizon. Used to, every day. And now, I built this place to die in. Didn't realize I could build it to live in instead. She didn't respond, just leaned her head against his shoulder and stood with him until the light dipped low. That evening after dinner, Clara stepped outside alone. The air was warm for once, and the land no longer looked so cold. She walked past the barn, where Eli had started mending the roof, past the fence Micah had once helped fix, out toward the ridge where she'd first seen the valley open wide before her. She knelt by the patch of ground where Micah's saddlebag had been found. Eli had placed a stone there, a simple one, no name carved, no words, just a marker. Clara ran her fingers over the top and whispered, I'm sorry. I should have said it sooner. I should have held your hand. I should have told you you mattered. The wind picked up, carrying her voice into the trees. She stayed until the stars came out. Then one morning, a letter came. Brought by a courier from across the hills, the envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. Eli opened it at the kitchen table while Clara rocked June gently in her arms. Well, she asked. It's from a town marshal in Cross Hollow, he said. Says Crowley showed up there last week, claimed to be a preacher looking to start a congregation. Clara's heart went still. Eli kept reading. Didn't last long. Someone recognized his face. Turns out they'd heard what happened here. Word got out. And, she asked quietly. He tried to run. They shot him twice. He's dead. She closed her eyes, holding June closer. Eli set the letter down and came to her. You all right? She nodded. He was already dead to me. This just makes it official. He kissed her forehead. Outside, the sun rose over the hills. Spring came. Slowly, but it came. Eli's land grew warmer, softer. The soil no longer froze overnight. Crops began to sprout again, modest, stubborn little things. Clara took over tending the garden, her hands calloused from labor, not pain. She taught June to walk beside the barn. She taught her to laugh. She taught her that her name meant light. And one day, without ceremony or discussion, Eli took Clara's hand and led her to the old cedar tree near the ridge. There, beneath the branches that had once shielded them from Crowley's storm, he asked her to stay. Not just as the woman who'd survived. Not as the broken girl the town had tried to erase. But as family. And she said yes. The wedding was small, just a few faces. Mabel cried the whole time. Dinah sent a flask of strong drink and a note that said, Tell the land it's yours now. It'll listen. They danced in the dirt, barefoot under the stars. And when June took her first real steps that night, wobbling from Clara's arms into Eli's, the whole world seemed to stand still and clap. The town changed slowly. Not perfect. Not kind overnight. But they remembered. They remembered the girl they tried to break and the man who stood beside her. And in remembering, they made room for others, for justice, for a kind of love that refused to die under weight. Years passed. The house expanded. The porch was rebuilt. A swing hung from the old cedar. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, Clara would stand at the edge of the ridge with June at her side, now taller, now stronger, and she'd say, "This land once tried to bury me, and I grew roots instead." Because that's what healing was, not the absence of scars, but the living proof that something hurt and still kept growing. And in that house, on that land, under those stars, they didn't just survive. They lived, they loved, and they stayed free.